Hello everyone, thanks again for tuning in. Today we'll be doing a study on the Ark of the Covenant, which the Old Testament talks about greatly. The New Testament tells us that the Old Testament, a lot of the rituals, a lot of the things that the children of Israel did with their sacrifices and the law, all these things were types of Christ or shadows. And this is revealed in the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews. So I just wanted to take this time to kind of explain some things that the Lord have shown me concerning some of these shadows and types. And one of them is the Ark of the Covenant. And inside this ark were three items. One was manna, the other was the Ten Commandments, and the third item was Aaron's rod. Now, I think at this moment it would be really helpful to understand that the things that are important in the Old Testament, like the Ark of the Covenant and the land of Canaan and the prophets of the old, all these things were shadows of the real Christ. The good land was something that God told Israel to fight for, the land of Canaan. The land of Canaan is a type of Christ. When we read in the book of Joshua, when they finally entered into the land, they were given allotted portions. And a lot of it wasn't given out based on the size of the tribe. It was given out according to God's own will, according to sometimes the way that certain tribes stood up. So God had his own way of giving out their portion. Well, in the New Testament, in the book of Colossians, the Apostle Paul tells us that Christ is our portion. He is our allotted portion. So Paul was even equating the land of Canaan to a type or shadow of Christ. We also see the prophets. The nation of Israel. The nation of Israel is a type of the church of today. The prophets, and the priests, all of these guys were types and shadows of the one Messiah. Christ is the true prophet. Christ is the true high priest. The sacrifices, all the sacrifices were types and shadows of the one Messiah. And the book of Hebrews, I believe chapter 10, tells us that Christ, God at an appointed time, God did away with the old covenant so he could bring in the new. So what Christ came to do was the Lord's will, which was to replace all the sacrifices. But he was going to have to fulfill all those things that the shadows or types of the meaning of those sacrifices meant. So I said all this to say the same thing applies to the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is also a type of the Messiah, our Christ. Inside the ark, and once again, it had the Ten Commandments, the manna, and it had the Ten Commandments, the manna, and Aaron's rod. So now I want to take this time and read with me in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, and verse 16, and we're going to read verse 21 and 22. Verse 16 says, "And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I shall give you." Verse 21 and 22. "And you shall put the expiation cover on top of the ark." In the King James it says mercy seat. That you shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark. "And into the ark you shall put the testimony that I shall give you. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim, which are upon the ark of the testimony, of everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel." So you can see a picture here. In verse 16, God says, "I'm going to give you a testimony that I want you to put into the ark." In verse 21 and 22, it tells us that God was going to communicate with the high priest and Moses and them from behind the ark. So the ark is like the mediator between God and man. And we know that in reality Christ is our mediator. So in type, the Ark of the Covenant is a type of Christ. One of the other interesting things is that the mercy seat. The mercy seat of the ark was something that was on top of the ark, and it covered the three items that were inside of the ark. And what's interesting is that this lid that was on top of the items, that covered the items, is called the mercy seat. Now what the Lord showed me was this: mercy is supposed to be seen. And what Christ brought to us was God's mercy. And he prevented God's judgment from coming to those who would receive Christ as our Savior. So the mercy seat was something that was on top of the ark, and the message that the Lord gave me and I share with you is that that mercy should be seen even in us. I'm out of time right now. I know I took a long journey through the Old Testament, but join me again for part 2 on our study of the Ark of the Covenant. God bless.